Good evening. Welcome to this study session of the Board of Education for the month of April. The board met in executive session at 6:15 to discuss personnel charges that we have going and contract negotiations. So welcome to this public session. Call the meeting to order, and please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. The flag is right behind me here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And for those of you who haven't seen it, we have another flag. I think we've shown it, but this is the result of Kelly here tonight, and her thought that we should have a Shenendehowa flag. So that's our Shenendehowa flag at this point. Yay. Thank you, announcements. We have several presentations tonight, and we'll move to them quickly. I am going to ask the board, as we adopt the agenda, if agree to one minor modification. We have something on here after the high school drama showcase update on Board of Education candidates. I'd like to just move that information item down after the BOCES presentation, because we have several people here who are from the MOVE program and want to be able to go see and talk about that, and then free them up. So if there's no objection, could I have a motion, Bob? A second, Naomi? All those in favor? Thank you. I should mention one other thing. Two of our board members are not here tonight, one dealing with a personal family health issue, and Todd Gilbert and Christina is dealing with a last-minute work issue that is going to cause her not to be here tonight. So with that, we'll move forward. This is a study session. We're designed for the purpose of our having administrative updates. There are no public comments at study sessions. Residents may attend the next scheduled business meeting, which is on May 8th. And or contact the board via boe@shenet.org with any comments or questions. All questions come into the Office of Public Information Officer and are shared with the board and or superintendent as appropriate. Policy questions or concerns are typically addressed by the board president. Operational questions or concerns are typically addressed by the superintendent or designee. And we'll move directly to the superintendent and update.
Thank you very much, Mr. Casey. Just two quick updates. One is in front of you. Invitation to the 25-year reception. So essentially, when people have been employed with us for 25 years, we pause to tell them thank you very much and recognize them for that. So we hope all board members could attend on May 8th, 45:30 p.m. In High School West cafeteria. So it's been a long tradition for Shen. So please, if you could put that on your calendar, that'd be greatly appreciated. The second piece, I just wanted to thank, certainly not all board members were able to attend because of other obligations, but we were fortunate, and I said a very sincere way, to be a part of a very special ceremony this past Sunday. As far as I can look back, this is the first time it's happened in Shen's history. So when you think about the significance of that, certainly I could say the first time happened since I've been here in 13 years, that we awarded an honorary degree to Jacob Monday, a young man who, quite frank with you, until Sunday, I never really had a chance to have real conversations with. But after talking to him, I realized that, and I don't want to make this a sad occasion, but it's one of those things where we all know the inevitable, but I hope that if I'm ever at that point, that I'm absolutely okay with it. And so talking to Jacob was one of those moments where you couldn't be sad, because he was so, as a person, he's so happy-go-lucky kid. And the things, he just wanted to laugh. He just wanted me to tell him stuff, that all kind of crazy questions he asked, and he and I just sat there and laughed while everyone else is being serious. We're just having a good time laughing. And I say that because I think that's a lesson to all of us in terms of the preciousness of life, and we can't take anything for granted, and life is a wonderful thing regardless of whatever form it puts us in. It's a wonderful thing. And so I want to thank the board members, and I want to thank the community, and particularly the high school class advisor, Mrs. Pfaffenbach, and some of the other folks, and some of the kids who said, hey, we should do this and make this happen. And my job was pretty easy, just stay out of the way. stay out of the way and let people do what they do best in this community rally. So I want to say thank you for that as well as we move forward. So shift gears in terms of life and appreciation of life. One of the things that we try to do as a board is try to acknowledge different people who do great things in the school district. And tonight we have, we have a lot of great presentations, but tonight we actually have two different groups, different here reasons. One, we have a showcase of some of our tremendous talent of our students in the drama arena. And we also have a showcase of students and staff, not the same as Mrs. Barrett is wonderful. But I had so let me back up for the first one. Today we had Deputy Commissioner Joan Ebert from State Education Department visit with us for 3 or 4 hours. She and I toured around. And one of the last stops we made was actually, we thought about coming over to this program, but time kind of squeezed us on time. Last stop we made was in high school, and we stopped into the chorus room, and Mrs. Baird kind of threw her kids together real quick, and it was absolutely amazing, the talent level of these young people. I'm sitting there thinking like, man, I'm such a slouch. I can't do anything. The talent level was off the chart. These young folks singing, it was just unbelievable. So that's on one side of the coin in terms of tremendous talent. I've been pretty fortunate to stop in the MOVE program, which you'll see a presentation on, and again to see the dedication of staff with our students, and then to see kids get excited about stuff that, quite frankly with you, a lot of us take for granted every day. And to see some of the things that they do is pretty amazing. And I say that because anyone who ever think that life is have dealt you whatever, spend some time and look at the beauty of life itself. And that's the thing I think sometimes people fail to forget is the beauty of life itself. And I've seen that. I've seen it now in the past 3 days in 3 different, very distinct ways. And I'm sharing that with the public and the community because sometimes we get bogged down with everything else. And we forget to celebrate the moments that we have. And so kudos to all the folks who work with our kids every day, from our kids in chorus to our kids in the MOVE program tonight, to bring out the best of who they are. And that's what we're ultimately doing, bringing out the best of who kids are. So those are kind of my opening comments, and I think it's very appropriate to share it as we go into the end of the school year. A lot of award ceremonies coming up, a lot of recognitions, and I know I find myself personally just looking at my calendar. Where am I going next? Where am I going next? And sometimes just to stop and say, hold on, not where I'm going next, but why? And what can I add value to that experience for those young people being recognized? So thank you very much for board members who were present, and for those who weren't present, thank you for your thoughts because I know you were there in spirit as well.
You want to mention this, the public forum?
And so the third piece, thank you, Mr. Casey. Another piece that talking about on the other side, we had last Thursday a public safety forum, because public safety school safety is on the mind's eye of many, if not most. And it was a tremendous opportunity for the Board of Education to hear from residents and staff members about different thoughts, concerns around school safety. So we outlined many things that we're doing as a school system. We got a lot of positive feedback. We got a lot of suggestions from the group. And all those things add to what we've been doing all along. And as I mentioned then, I mentioned now, I'm not a school safety expert. That's the reason why we tap into people who are school safety experts. And we bring in the best minds to tell us what we're supposed to do. In fact, next week, I'm trying to find Mrs. Carmen. She's out there somewhere. We have a whole bunch of law enforcement folks that's going to be walking again through all our buildings as a part of a safety audit. And we're not doing this because of the popularity of it. We're doing it because it's an annual thing that we do. Having these folks walk through and poke holes in everything that we do as a system. So all the things that we think we might be doing right, they probably come in and say, guess what, guys, that's all wrong. You need to do this, you need to do that, we need to do that, and we make the adjustment. So that public forum is a great opportunity, certainly for me as superintendent and for other administrators present to hear from the public, but also to let the public know that as a system, we're constantly trying to improve upon what we do and trying to find a delicate balance between protecting and serving our kids in a public education environment and protecting them while they're in a public education environment, and trying to find that balance. It's always that piece that we're trying to find as we move forward. So again, all board members were present at that event, so it was a great opportunity. I don't know if you want to offer any thoughts on that, Mr. Casey, on
Yeah,
behalf
I
of the
think
board?
just it was an opportunity. We've, as a board this year, one of our goals was to have more opportunities to have some dialogue with the public. And two issues, actually, the first one we had decided on was mental health services. And we had a wonderful forum, and we did only a 6 to 7 o'clock kind of thing before a board meeting. And we got several suggestions, and people very engaged in that conversation. This safety and security issue, we thought we should have a standalone meeting. We started at 6:30. We went till about 8:45, and we were competing against everything going on at this campus. It was hard to, other than that we were here and we were in the auditorium here. The high school was filled with a college night. There was a lacrosse game. There were every place you turned around, there were things going on. But we had people who were passionate. And as we've said to people, we're on the same, we may disagree on or not come to the same conclusion everybody does, but we're all on the same page on this. And I think we demonstrated that. We greatly appreciated the presence and the participation of the sheriff and his chief deputy on school safety, Ken Cooper. So there's more on this. We did this because we thought along the process we needed to hear from the public, and the public needed not only with suggestions and questions, but also anything that they're confused about, that we try to all get on the same page on this and people understand the commitment. And even people who had some strong recommendations afterward, in the notes they sent us, all thanked us for providing the opportunity. And I think, so it's a great thing. It's not the end of the world. We've got more work to do on this. But along the way, there's a lot of thought going into it, and a lot of commitment, and the realization that we don't own all the knowledge on this one, that there are other folks who are expert on this. And I refer to it, as I did that night, sitting in a meeting where we had we almost covered the entire alphabet with federal agencies at the table, including the Secret Service, and asked for suggestions from people, and the state Homeland Security Office and the sheriff who participates and his people participate, trying to deal with this as a societal kind of issue that happens to be something that we're talking about in the schools, but Toronto yesterday could happen on the street as well. So I think just trying to reassure people, get some ideas, and then move forward from that. More to come on that, but it was a great opportunity for us.
Good, thank you. So at this point, I ask Mrs. Baird and her wonderful young folks to come forward and tell us about some of the things that they're doing, and we go from there.
No
one's in costume tonight?
No. Come on Friday. We have a cabaret program at High School East at 7:30 on Friday. You'll see most of these kids. Are you all in it? They're all in it too. Yeah, there's 30 performers, but 26 out of the 30 are from the musical company. So they'll be there and in costume.
There we go. Okay.
So anyway, this is the students who could be here this evening. Everybody's so busy this time of year, but there's a few students here who are cast members, and I don't see that we have any crew members here, but if you're not aware of how the High School Musical Company works, it's a huge club, involves over 100 students, and about 55 of them are on the stage, and then half of that number is working behind the scenes on the production. So you have stage crew members, you have sound and lights, and they're all trained on the wonderful equipment that we have here at the High School East Auditorium. And the students run all of that. They're involved in costumes and getting kids changed backstage, makeup, hair, they do it all. And unlike a lot of other high school programs, there's no adult when the show is running backstage. They run all of it. We have a student stage manager who is amazing, absolutely amazing. And one of the cool things, I think, is that we have students who go on to perform on the stage, but we have students who go on to work in technical theater as well, and learn all of the skills involved in the production of shows and administration and stage management, and I think that's a really cool thing as well. Jody Orlando was assistant director for the show this year, and Joe Cott was our producer. Joe Gumper was our orchestra pit director, and if you were fortunate enough to come to Footloose this year, this was the first year we had our pit on the stage, which was very exciting for our cast to have that sound right there on the stage. So it was a really cool year. It was a great show. Our president of the club, Bella Anderson, I will let you say a word or two if you'd like.
About the show?
Yeah, about the club. About the show.
Okay. Again, I'm Bella Anderson. I was the president this year. I also had a vice president, a secretary, and a treasurer. If you came to the meeting in the fall for the drama, we had 5 officers. We had 1 less for the spring musical, so we were all working a little harder. This show ran so smooth. It was such an amazing thing to be a part of. It was so different from years past. I was in all 4 musicals, and each one had a different experience, and I can easily say that Footloose was a success. It was such an amazing success. Almost all nights were sold out. I had so many people come up to me at school and say, I came to Footloose, I loved it, and I was just so touched that everyone tried to come, and everyone who did come loved it. Everyone who came, they loved it. It was great.
Very good. So we would, John is prepared to sing one of the tunes.
Oh, yeah.
Character, because you're Mama.
I had to set up my thing.
So I was Ethel McCormick. I was his mother. He was Ren McCormick. He's going to sing a little song, I Can't Stand Still. And Ren is a very stubborn character. He's a stubborn boy, and he moves into a small town that is solely based around the beliefs of the church. And Ren is not. Ren is not like that. He comes in and he shakes things up. So he's going to sing a song about how he can't stop dancing in a town that doesn't allow dancing. So that's my spiel.
Right here, right up here. Come on.
Center stage.
All right.
Do you want to come to the center, John? The mic is there. The mic is there.
Yeah, there you go.
That's good.
If you want to dance around.
But
No,
this is-
that's okay. I'm not in the right attire.
No, that's fine.
I never walk when I can run. I don't believe I ever could. People try to slow me down, saying, boy, you really should kick back and chill, but I can't stand still. I called the doctor, he said, son, I cannot offer you a pill. So I never found relief, and now I've got to move until I've had my fill. I can't stand still. Back where I come from, laughs never humdrum. I wish I could take you there. Oh, we have the world at our feet. Life is sweet, ain't no doubt. Grab a seat, check it out. And then I do a dance that I'm not gonna do right now. Never would end, but I lost it somehow. Would you look at me now? I'm trying hard to tone it down. Gotta watch my P's and Q's. Maybe look before I leap. But then I think, hey, what's the use? Ain't done it yet, and I can't forget how it feels when you dance till you drop. So don't even stop to suggest that I stop. I never will. I can't. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. I can't stand still.
know,
I would just really like to say that we are very blessed at Shenendehowa to have such wonderfully talented students. I was able to go tonight to some of the rehearsal for the cabaret. I have a big union conference this weekend in Buffalo, so I can't go to the cabaret. I feel horrible that I can't be there. But tonight, when I was seeing students perform, when they were in the chorus, and they were singing. Tonight, they're up there, they're performing. I'm like, oh my God, I didn't even know they could sing like that. They're just so talented, you know, and I think a lot of it has to do with their dedication to music, but I also think a lot of it has to do with Heather and her dedication to music, and I really think that Heather deserves
I do want to say, my wife taught here for 33 years, and we've missed very few of the musicals. This was the funnest one, that, as an audience member, and watching how many kids were participating, and just the variety of talent up there. It was wonderful. Bob had a son in this. Bob, what's your reaction to?
It's amazing the number of kids, and just a lot of the ensemble pieces had a lot of kids coming and going. That song, Watching You, I mean, it's the way you present it was almost haunting, but seeing all these kids come and go, and then the contrast with other scenes that were very optimistic, it was a lot of, you had a lot of emotion going on between scene to scene that you typically don't see out there, so it was exceptional.
Well, I'll tell you, the kids really related to this one. I mean, they loved this, so you saw that love. You saw the love. They were loving
I had a lot of friends in the show. In fact, I know John. We went to elementary school together. So, and then sit with Jen at lunch. So, having a lot of friends in the show and being like a sophomore watching it was really fun. It was so great. I loved it. I can easily say this was my favorite one, even though I loved what you guys did last year too. It's my probably my favorite one to see, because I've been seeing like as many of the musicals as I can as possible. So the support from the school, like the student body, was pretty big for this one too. Like I think a lot of I was talking to a lot of kids, and they were all like, I want to go see Footloose, or they were really sad they didn't get a chance to go see it. So I think that this one was definitely a really good choice for students as well.
Yeah, Gary?
Thank you.
I actually wanted to direct a question to Ms. Beard. How many years ago now was it since we opened the new auditorium? About 12? 13?
13.
Yeah, 13, when you first came.
I happened to be president of the board and had the opportunity to dedicate the auditorium. And I actually didn't speak a whole lot about the attributes of the auditorium. Instead, I remember talking about how important the people were to making the facility, to making the school what it is. And I was thinking primarily of the employees. I have to say that, the teachers, their talents, the administrators, their leadership, all the support staff and all the things they do that make possible for everybody else to do what they do. But of course, our students, no matter how good we would be, without talented and dedicated students, we wouldn't get the product that we get. Okay, that's all a preamble to my question. The question itself is, when we designed that facility, we tried to design a facility that would serve both immediate and anticipated needs. In other words, have the potential to not limit what you can do when you're in that facility. Have we reached that? Do we need things in there that we don't have at the present time that allow you to do even a better job?
Yes.
Okay.
There's the fly system that allows us to raise and lower scenery items. Looks like it was designed without realizing that there were going to be doors on either side of the backstage. So there's a section in the middle of the stage where there's no flies because there's a doorway in the wall where the pulley system is for the flies. And I have been told that it's no big problem. I've been told that it's possible to move the wires over so that you can have bars over the top of where the doorway is. And I was going to look into what it would take to put those up, but that was something that's on my plate to look at.
Gary asked the question because he's not only the history on this, but he's on the facilities committee, so, you know, he wants to bring something back to him, so.
Okay. Augie's in there too, isn't he?
Yeah, he was.
Or was.
So thank you all. We're very proud of you. This is wonderful. It's wonderful in the community that they see the school pulls together and provide so many opportunities for people. It's not only students, but it's the staff. Thank you, Heather, and thank you to your co-directors. And I'll tell you one thing, when the athletes come in here, no one sings.
Thank goodness. Thank goodness. Oh, someone was that. This is agility. Can you put that range?
Yeah, and what it was Mike that night.
So, Mrs. Smiley will introduce the MOVE program, and I think also a video. You do all your stuff.
Yes, good evening. Thanks to Kelly DeFisciani, we have prepared a video, which I think really is the best way to highlight our new MOVE program at Tisago. Following the video, I will introduce the teacher, and she has brought some of her extraordinary team members here. So you'll have an opportunity to say hello and ask them questions if you'd like. But
Just want to check the volume, that's all.
okay.
And while you're setting that volume, just watch the staff here. A multitude of staff involved with these children in ways that if that was your child, you'd want that staff involvement right there with you.
Did you watch the video
I did.
before
I
tonight?
did. I watched it this afternoon on the.
Ready?
Yes, go.
In July 2017, Shenendehowa opened its first full MOVE program housed in Tisago Elementary School. MOVE stands for Mobility Opportunities via Education. Students recommended for this type of specialized programming have physical and cognitive impairments that require individualized programs that focus on academic skills, communication skills, and improving independence. Before we opened this program, students were in our functional skills program or in a special school outside the district. Having this program in district enables students to receive the services they need in a classroom where all students have similar needs and where they have the opportunity to interact daily with non-disabled peers, with the school, and their home community. After morning arrival, students go to homeroom with their typical peers. This is an opportunity for socializing and benefits all students. Students learn to navigate the building, greet students and adults, and partake in the general morning routine. Students receive individual and small group instruction in reading, writing, and math. Each student's program is individualized based on the physical and cognitive level of the student. Students have multiple exposures to learning using all senses. Some students are able to match words, while others are working on letter identification. Another student may be following along while a passage is read to them, and then answer questions using assistive technology. Students receive the individual support and the wait time that they need so they can participate at their ability and readiness level. Adults model, provide hand-over-hand direction and repetition in order for students to learn and practice skills for long-term learning.
What is bumpy? Oatmeal cookies with raisins are bumpy. Bumpy, bumpy streets can be bumpy. Bumpy, bumpy, a wagon on a bumpy street goes bumpity, bump, bumpity, bump. Baskets are bumpy. Bump up, bump down. This
fist or bumpy, make a fist when you feel the bumps. That you can do. We're going to make a fist. Use this hand now. We're going to use this hand and feel the bumps. Those are your knuckles. They go bump, 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 bump. And then we have some objects that are bumpy. So here's more bumpy. We're going to use this hand again. Bumpy, bumpy, bumpy. Bumpy, bumpy, bumpy. And you can hold bumpy. The bumps are bumpy. Blue, green, yellow, red, purple. This is green. Where did it go? Did you go for it? Want to try blue? Blue, blue, green, yellow, red, purple, blue. Where are we going? Good job.
All of the students in the MOVE classroom receive related services to support their learning. The focus of speech therapy is developing independent communication. Some students are working on articulation and oral language, while other students are working on communicating through an assistive technology device, such as an iPad or a Dynabox. Speech, in collaboration with the occupational therapist, also addresses feeding needs. Some students receive hearing service and/or vision services. Sensory is a significant focus for students. We don't often think about how we learn through our ears, eyes, nose, and touch. Therapists and teaching staff provide a variety of exposures to information through all senses to teach and reinforce skills and concepts. One of the most important components of the MOVE program is the focus on fine and gross motor skills. Each student has different goals as they work towards increasing independence. Occupational therapy works on fine motor skills, such as self-feeding and using a keyboard and dressing. Physical therapy supports the development of large muscles to improve walking, using stairs, and riding a bike. While most students receive individual therapy, the most critical component of these therapies is the education and consultation provided for the classroom staff so they can reinforce and practice the goals developed by the specialists. The entire Tasago community has embraced the students in the MOVE program. In addition to homeroom, students are integrated for art, music, assemblies, and after-school clubs, including Best Buddies. In Best Buddies, typically developing peers engage in fun, recreational activities in and out of school with a peer with special needs. Here, the hard work of school is done, and fun with friends begins.
So before I'll have the staff start coming up, I wanted to say two things. One is I can't thank the Tasago community enough under the leadership of Mr. Pace in embracing this program. Everybody in the school has just welcomed our students and our staff, and we're very proud of that. The other thing that I wanted to mention was that to help acclimate students and adults to this new student population, our school psychologist and counselor in Tasago created a curriculum, and we're able to go around to the classrooms and teach students and staff so that they really understand about the disabilities and how to interact with students just like they're our siblings. So here is Mrs. Hancock Huddle, teacher extraordinaire, and I will have her bring up her staff who is here today so that you can say thank you to them for the wonderful job.
Before I embarrass my staff, can my Tasago friends and family just stand up so you guys can see how many people are here supporting the program for us? even had a substitute that came in for me come in just because she was impressed with the program and enjoyed working with the kids, so thank you, Arlene. So I'd like Judy, Jackie, and Paul to come up, please. And Mrs. Pierce, if you could come up, please. These are 3 of my classroom aides, and Mrs. Pierce is my speech therapist in the classroom. And we've learned this year that there really is no I in team because everybody works together, including the people that stood up, because they all work together to help make the program a success. And our kids are generally accepted throughout the school. It wasn't just accepting, it was warm, it was welcoming. And to go down the hallways, our kids are all recognized, and our kids are learning, and as well as the kids that are interacting with our kids. So I think it's really been a wonderful year for us, and wonderful staff. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for having us.
So we'd all like to, well, I was going to ask you if you'd like to say something. Before we shake their hands, we're all going to shake their hands.
Thank you so much for everything that you do for this, these children every day. 1. 2, do you see, Dr. Robinson, Michelle, this program growing? Do you?
Yes. I was going to say.
Don't get too excited. Yes. Keep it right there. You stop right there before we make commitments that we're not ready for yet.
I will just say the 2 new referrals came across my desk this morning.
So. Yes.
Watch out, he put his glasses on.
Yeah. I was starting looking at you like this.
And, Dr. Robinson and I have had this conversation too. If there is, it's a challenge, and I can see that you do a tremendous job with this, and if there are emergencies, how are they handled if there is an emergency with one of the children? I'm sure
I'm sorry.
You just did your bus show.
For that type of emergency, yes, we've worked with the Director of Transportation, and so far as evacuations, things like that, we have all those policies and protocols, and we've been debugging the whole system to make it as smooth as possible, and the kids are learning how to handle drills and things, as well as the staff learning what might come up. So we've all kind of brainstormed as a group, and you have a lot of years of experience here, so that tends to help too.
And I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. Yeah, because we just had that evacuation, a medical emergency with one of the children.
Oh, so. Well, actually, we do have a nurse in the classroom.
Okay.
And the school nurse has been wonderful about it, and we just had a situation today. It was taken care of. The classroom flow still kept going. The emergency situation was taken care of, and no problems, because you really know what to do with the kids.
No big deal.
Can I ask, this is the first year it's been launched, and so now that you're nearing the end of the first year, I'm sure that there's been surprises, or maybe no surprises, but along the way, maybe looking to make changes. How are you looking to make any changes going into next year based on what you've learned from this year?
We need to get more equipment. We need to get a second bike so that we can actually have races in the hallway or outside, maybe. Not a lot of differences, because I've been doing the program for 30 years already, so this was kind of nice to be able to come in and set it up. These guys have all picked up beautifully on what we handle, and I don't know, we're probably just going to keep going ahead with what we're doing, because the kids, even looking at the video, I don't know if you guys saw, but from 2 months ago to now when we did the video, you can see so many changes in the kids day by day, that it just keeps improving and improving.
Are they there for the standard school day, or is it shorter?
No, standard school day. They have very full days. Usually, they're fall asleep on the bus on the way home because they've been working all day.
Thank you.
Just one last question, and it was the last subject up there on the video. The integration with the other students at DeSago.
Yes.
The involvement is that looks to me like a real plus, and it involves some training and some adjusting, right?
Yes, we have Best Buddies going on, and those are some of the teachers back there that have helped get that program going. Training the kids, we've had Jen Paradise had set it up. We had the introductory meeting where the kids could actually, that were the peer group, would work and ask questions. They would see the different challenges that our kids had. They would ask questions about how would it be the best to work with them, and now it's just, they'll go right over and it's like, oh, you're my buddy. Another program that we didn't get to talk about was Reading Buddies, where one of the other classes comes in, and they've actually picked out books that are appropriate. They come in and they read to the kids, and the interactions are awesome.
Well, on behalf of the board, I think we all want to shake your hand. So thank you for
Only if you do it to everybody.
Yeah, we will, absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
So much. It's been a pleasure.
Go ahead.
And thank you everybody for welcoming us. Thank you.
Good seeing you. Thank you.
You're welcome. You? Thank you. It's great seeing you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for asking questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I think several years ago, I don't even know why we got it, but we had a magnet that on it had a large magnet, probably 6 by 12, that said Shen Pride. And I was thinking as they were speaking, this is one of the things as a board member when we can have an impact. That's one of the things that makes me proud as a board member. I know makes the other board members, the kind of services that we're providing in a case that's not always easy. And so we thank you for your patience and your commitment to these kids. Thank you.
So before Mrs. Flory, I was going to say, go. Still doing the last name things. This is for the, yeah, no, it'd be forever.
Chill. Put the glasses on.
Yeah, you know.
Get the glasses on.
So just for the context of the public, I think even the MOVE program presentation is an example that when there's certain things that we have in our goals document that we say we're going to do, and so we use this, the board meeting as an opportunity, one, to inform the board of where we are with certain things, and also for the public to have appreciation of the wide variety of programs and services that we deliver here. And literacy and technology integration has been a big part of our goals, and just one example. So Mrs. Flores has been doing a lot of great work with it. So we're just using some of the work that she's doing at Scano as an example again of some of the great work that's happening across the district, but in this case, Scano. So, Joe.
Thank you. And I wanted to start off by thanking the board for supporting the professional development that took place this year in Scano with Dr. Stephanie Appanito. I also want to thank Kathleen Strangers, I know she's out there in the crowd, because she's the person that came up to me and suggested using her as a professional developer. And the professional development really has been very successful this year. And I have some student work examples. I don't know if you went in and looked at my slides, but there are some websites.
He just saw the video. He stopped after the video.
There are some websites you can look at for the student work samples. So the first slide that we have up there just outlines the goals that I wanted Dr. Appanito to focus on. As I began to plan for Scano's professional development, I wanted to ensure that all of our kindergarten through 5th grade teachers would benefit from it, that it wasn't just for one grade level. I wanted to focus in on specific content areas, as Dr. Robinson mentioned, really looking at the literacy block and how we can integrate technology in that area. I also want to make sure students weren't on technology all day. This wasn't the goal, to get technology out there and having them be on technology, but really what were those specific key areas that we could implement the technology. And as you know, our 4th and 5th grade teachers each received 15 Chromebooks this year, so I wanted to ensure that they had that support and how to integrate the technology into their classroom with those Chromebooks. So the next slide outlines the day of work that Dr. Appanito completed with our kindergarten through 3rd grade teachers. She focused on the book Writing Strategies by Jennifer Saravallo. I don't know if you've heard of that through other presentations, but she came in and she provided a full day workshop on this book. In the morning, she really talked about what were the resources in the book, how teachers can use the book, and then in the afternoon, she gave teachers time to create resources that they could then go into their classroom the next day and use right away. She also gave an overview of some iPad apps that they could use during their literacy block instruction. The majority of Dr. Appanito's work was with 4th and 5th grade teachers, and the way we designed it was that she would come in for a half-day workshop 1 month, introduce some technology resources, allow the teachers to go back to their classroom, plan how they would integrate that technology, and then she would come in the next month and do some coaching days. So for example, in October, she came in and shared the resource Padlet. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Padlet, but it's a really neat resource, and some teachers really were excited about it, went back, decided how they were going to use it in their classroom, and then in November, Dr. Appanito went into the classroom and helped the teachers set up the Padlet for their students, help the students get on, and really demonstrate and coach with that teacher and how to use that technology resource. And then that continued in December, January, and February.
So many goals were achieved during Dr. Affinito's work. Each 4th and 5th grade teacher did create a Google Classroom. That was one thing that I really wanted to ensure that they all did, knowing that when they get to middle school, in 6th grade especially, they're using that Google Classroom a lot. So I wanted to make sure they had that transition into middle school. The teachers did have a better understanding of how to use technology in a variety of content areas. Student engagement increased. There was definitely evidence of differentiated instruction. And on this slide, this is where there's a Google site. And if you go to that Google site, you will see where Dr. Affinito put all of her presentations that she did with the teachers. They're all located there, as well as student work samples. So you can see the differentiation that took place throughout the work days. So we did conduct a student survey at the beginning, and then again after the last coaching day. I just took one answer from the survey as a whole because I thought this was the most interesting. And as you can see from the graphic, that there was an increase in percentage of students who like to read. Now, I don't believe that students are liking to read more because they're on technology reading, but I do believe that they enjoyed collaborating with one another a lot more using that technology. So that was their increase. They were excited to read things and then share it with one another via the technology. So we also surveyed teachers. There's a lot of text here, but in general, I chose 2 of the questions and some samples of the responses just to demonstrate the success. The teachers responded that they felt very supported and the time out of their classroom was well worth it because they gained knowledge and were exposed to resources they could immediately implement into their classroom the next day. And then, of course, I also asked, looking ahead, what would they like for additional support? And I'm beginning to plan for the professional development for next year in Scano. And the teachers are really hoping we can continue our collaboration with Dr. Affinito, or at least engage in similar PD where we have workshop days and then some coaching days. And what was great on this is there's a flip grid, and that's one of the tools that she taught the teachers how to use in their classroom. And we asked teachers to go on the flip grid and talk about their experience with Dr. Affinito. So if you have an opportunity, click on that. There's some really great responses to hear the teachers actually using the tool and responding.
Jill, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
When you talk about professional development and ask what we want to do as a school, so I guess in my mind I thought very much about professional development. I thought about individual professional development. And maybe Oliver, for you as well, do individual schools have a professional development goal that brings this collaboration, brings people together, you settle on a goal?
Yeah,
and
so everything goes back to our district goals and recognizing the unique talents in different places where schools are. Schools establish then professional development goals. So for instance, Jill is addressing literacy through integration of technology, but bringing someone from outside. So part of, if you want to say it's just a loose, tight coupling, we're all going to the same place. It's kind of like traveling. We're all going to the same place. Some people may take a train, some people may drive, but we're all going to the same destination, and we all want to be there generally at the same time. And so what's the best approach to do it? And even in this, through Dr. Wood's office, 2 years ago, we split between PD between compliance, the number of hours that people need to track from an HR perspective, and provision on the Elizabeth side in terms of what's the quality professional development. The unique piece to what Jill is doing here, we do a lot of internal professional development. So she mentioned Kathleen Strand, Anna Sugarman, Jill herself, Gail Pritchard, a lot of stuff. But sometimes we didn't tap into outside folks. And we're pretty fortunate having universities in the region and people doing some really quality research to say what you find out in the field and how can that come in. And this is a case of Dr. Affinito from University of Albany. Has been doing some good research. So we try to marry those things when we can. And so it's different. It's not a cookie cutter. It's not a one size fit all. But everyone is focused on the similar goals. How do we get to that part is the unique piece of it. So, and each principal come up with a professional development plan, and they run it through Dr. Wood in terms of resource capacity, coordination of days, because we can't have a bunch of people at the same time. There's logistical type things, and also the quality of it, because at the end of it, if we're going to invest in the outside or inside, what's the expected outcome? So we start with the outcome in mind. What are we trying to achieve? And then, so is this the best way to achieve it? And then do we actually get to that at the end of the process?
And just one follow-up question. So what about the cross-pollination between the schools for the various, decisions they make moving forward on this? Piloting something,
So I invited Gail Petrofessa and Julie Bernetter to come to the professional development that was taking place with Dr. Affinito, and they created a workshop that they offered to other teachers in the district for grades 4 and 5.
And even this type presentation is one of the things that, you know, we learn different things from different people's experiences that we then use to fine tune the next generation of essential objectives for our process, the next generation of outcomes. And so if we see, I mean, Joe's talking about, you know, one of the things we learn very quickly, we make assumption that, okay, everyone gets a Chromebook, but are they on the same page in terms of their ease, comfort, knowledge of it? But answer is quickly no. So the question is, what do we know that works well to get people on the same page? And if something we could replicate and drop into a different training cycle, we do so. But we probably wouldn't know that until we have a smaller scale version of it that goes through very intently and someone who's documenting the research, or almost kind of look at a research project, so to speak. So part of we try to do that as much as we can to try to socialize our best practices and make them norms. Some we do very well. Some, quite frankly, we realize it's just unique to that situation or that circumstance, and we're not trying to push something out that doesn't necessarily work effectively.
So I have a question about just the technology. I know it's just a tool for furthering the literacy program, and it sounds like it's very effective in your presentation. But just as a specific tool, can you use the resources that, for example, are in the computer lab? You don't necessarily need a Chromebook to show them how to use Google Classroom. So, but do you only use that platform, or are you using all the resources that you have, maybe a tablet?
They're mainly using the Chromebooks, and what they have, and they're doing it usually in a center or like a small group instruction type of piece. So what's nice is that it's in the classroom. Students can go and grab it at any time throughout the day. With a computer lab, that's for the entire building, and they're signing that in, signing it out. So yes, they have gone to the computer lab and maybe started a project there, but then the Chromebooks allow them to work on it throughout the day in the classroom.
So I went to Skennedowa. It's my elementary school that I graduated from 5 years ago.
So long ago.
Yeah, I know. But it just makes me really sad for for 5th grade. I want to go back to 5th grade, especially with exams coming up. But I wanted to ask, because I noticed that you mentioned a lot about you were integrating like Google Classroom in the older students, like 4th and 5th, which I would have loved, because using Google Classroom going from like 5th to 6th grade was like a big adjustment for me. But you mentioned a lot with literacy, like both on the iPads and the Chromebooks. What, like, are you using any specific programs to improve literacy within your students, or are your students are your teachers putting their lesson plans through Google Classroom?
The teachers are using the Google Classroom in a variety of ways. Some teachers may use it, 2 or 3 times. Let the kids get on it during the school day. Some may just be once a week that they're going on. But they're setting up a lot of projects in the Google Classroom. A writing project. We did our writing prompts, our quarterly writing prompts. A couple of the classrooms really wanted to do that via Google Classroom this year. So it depends on the classroom. It depends, but it's been typically in reading assignments and writing assignments.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Joe.
Appreciate it. Thank you. So thank you very much. So the next 2 presentations is actually, you're going to hear my wonderful voice for a few minutes. Let me just click on this, and I'll stand up in a second here and make sure. So this is, it's actually a 1-slide piece, and I'm sharing this slide with the board and also with the public. Most people, well, people probably don't want to make assumptions what people don't know, but as a district in the 612, we have a 9-period day. And so if the board recall, last August, we hosted here a Future Ready conference. And a big part of that Future Ready talks about, there are many components of it, but one of the gears was time and space. How are we using time during the school day, and subsequently how we use space within the school day in terms of creating engaging opportunities for kids. And so forever and a day, people have always studied, how is a school schedule structured and all those type of things. And we have done it here at Shen. We've had different studies over the years. People look at different format for scheduling the school day. But quite frankly, it's never really taken off from a system perspective. And as we are now in the process, and you've heard Dr. Wood mention a few times about engaging classrooms, You hear talking about integration of technology. You hear having innovative practice. You hear all these things. So we're doing all these things, but we're still doing it in a very traditional format, structure, footprint. And so honestly, we're not necessarily maximizing the potential until we start looking at everything else. And so we're going into, this is a study, we're in a part of a study cycle now. So we didn't go into the study cycle to say we want this model and let's see what we have to do to make it fit. We went into the study cycle, let's look at everything and see what is in fact a good model to meet some of the things that we want to do. So if you see this cycle, and I won't necessarily go through all the components to you. So right now, we're very much in this research and development phase, and a big part of that is we're defining the why. Why are we, oh boy, I'm not sure what happened there, Ken. Okay, I'm going to be deleted soon. I'm not sure what happened. Okay, let me back out this whole thing and go back to here. I won't go there again. So trust me that we started out this whole thing why, answering the why question. Why do we need to look at some alternative way of how we use time? Again, looking at the 6-12 perspective. So the why piece became important because then that would kind of drive then how do we start looking at the what and the how. I think the mistake in the past have been people started how. How do we do this, but you don't know what you want to do, much less why you want to do it. And so we start with the first piece, the why piece of it. So defining the why becomes a big part of it. And a big part of defining the why, hopefully this one will work, was something that Dr. Wood, it still won't work, okay. I'm not sure what's going on here. I'm not the technology person. The technology person is trenching. So I'm not sure why. So the big part of the why is how do we have classrooms that are much more engaging for students and staff? How do we have a school environment that's much more engaging for students and staff? And so that was a big why. So we started with that why piece of it. And we started to say, okay, well, what are some intended outcomes that we want to realize as a result of this? And there's a series of intended outcomes. And so we said, okay, so we spent a lot of time reading research. We subscribe to Hanover Research. It's a big research company that does tons and tons of education research across the country. And so they have a wide variety of topics, and one of the big topics is time and space. And so we call through all this research that they're coming from across the country, try to understand what other places thought about when they were going through looking at alternative schedules, and then try to figure out, okay, how much of those things are similar to our thoughts, and then try to validate, if you will, some of the reasons why we want to approach certain things. So intended outcomes started that first part of the conversation. Then the next part of the conversation, we're going to say, okay, now we have some areas. Let's see what everyone else thinks about it. And that's the reason why we did a survey. So I think as board members, I think most board members responded to the survey. In fact, I was hoping today to have some feedback on that, but because of some other things that we had going on, didn't get to it. So we had 1,345 people respond to the survey. Pretty nice response to a survey when you think about it. And ironically, of that number, 694 were students. And 508 were parents, 154 teachers, 43 support staff, 6 administrators, 6 board members. So they want to say the board member who didn't respond. I don't know who didn't respond. So, if you're here, it's okay. I won't
look to the left, look to the right.
So I share that with you because we had a pretty wide cross-section of folks that responded to the survey when you think about it. And so at some point, I'll have an executive summary of the survey research. This just right here, this is just an example. I have like 8 of these documents. So to go through these documents and do it in justice, I want to make sure we spend the time to do it. But the survey was done to say, okay, we know what the research is saying about why intended outcomes. So what people's feelings? And generally, just looking at some general numbers, very positive in terms of the thing. So this is not a popularity survey. It's not a vote. We didn't put out there, hey, if you think we should do this, yes or no, because I think that's a worse mistake, because you're asking people to vote on emotions and not on information and knowledge. And so we never want to get caught into that situation. But generally, the questions people realize, oh, yeah. And so we're saying, okay, if people are general agreement with the intended outcomes, now the next part that we have to figure out in this phase here is saying, okay, how do we then start looking at different study? And so we transition from the study phase to this. Let's start looking at some different models then. And what are some models that satisfy some of these conditions? And how well these models satisfy some of these conditions? And if we could find, if there's such thing as a perfect model that we can put together, it could be, so when people, you hear terms like block schedule, you hear terms like hybrid, you hear all these terms that's out there that people look at. And whatever you want to call it, people want to call it what you call it, but we want to call it a model that, one, does more than what we're doing now, or do it better, or add value to the equation. At the end of the day, we won't propose anything that we're going to look back and say, oh, this is actually worse than we had. So that's the first starting point. The whole medical piece, minimally do no harm kind of thing. But ideally, we think that we can look at how do we structure the school day, how do we structure courses that particularly go back to the whole engaging experience for kids and do that a lot better than we're doing it right now. And so even issues of, so you talking about logistics of school days, just from a practical perspective, is one piece of it. We had a meeting the other day, and several people talking about the mental health piece of it. How many kids are saying, oh my God, I got to transition 8 times a day, and I can't take it anymore. Every 40 minutes, I'm getting up and leaving, going to the next thing. I have to turn my brain from math and go to this and go to this. And so kids are starting to feel it. Staff are starting to feel it. Everybody. So we see that piece of it. We were in the high school, a bunch of us were doing some safety walkthrough, and it hit me thinking in high school, I'm standing thinking like, every 40 minutes, we have 3,000 kids populate our hallways for 5 minutes. That's a lot of time from a safety perspective that we have to figure out 8 times a day. This happens. So 8 times a day, we got 3,000 kids in the hallway. Okay, I'm not sure if that's the best scenario we should have. So again, so I share this with you. So when we're thinking about this, we're not just thinking about, okay, do we go from 44-minute periods to 54 to 64 to 84? That's the easy part. The part is how we look at structure today and what benefit does it provide in a wide arena of areas for peace. So our next phase, we'll spend a lot of time looking at some of the survey, and then we'll get into what is called this modeling piece. And this is where we are bringing some focus groups to bring different people into the conversation to say, okay, we know what the survey said, and here's some themes from the survey. Let's get some small groups to have some conversations, to get deeper into the insights and the mind's eye of people who will be potentially impacted by whatever we do. So that's going to be the next phase to start some of those kind of things. Spring, late spring, summer, going into maybe even possible into the fall, to do those focus groups, because people always say, how can I be involved? I'm not a big fan of large committees. I'm going to be very frank. I'm not a big fan of large committees because large committees get dominated by a singular voice and everyone else sits back and does this, and then they talk about it in the parking lot. We want a small group of folks to come in and say, hey, this is a place where you can be safe. I want your best thinking. I want your most critical thinking. Leave it all on the table. Your job is not to solve a problem. Your job is to offer ideas, poke holes, and then we get information. We see what we can do with information. So that's the next phase. We're trying to do some focus groups, very focus group conversation with our faculty and staff, trying to get some sense of what all this means as we move forward. So we'll be doing a lot of that into the spring. And then once we get through that, then we go through another planning phase again to say, okay, we know what we know some models, we know some designs, then we start making some recommendations. And as we sit here, we're talking about something that yes, in next fall, spring, we'll start running, so for instance, we call, playing in the sandbox, different models. So, okay, this is our traditional model. Here's some sandbox model. How do those things parallel each other? Before we do something, we want to have a good idea that actually will work as well as we think it's going to work before we put it out, because the last thing we want to do is, we put out there, it's not working, and total disruption, total chaos, and certainly we never want to have that situation. So I share this with you as a board because whatever we do is going to come back to our why, our engaged classroom, our intended outcomes. Or whatever we don't do is going to come back to those things. And so we're not going into this to say we want this model and we're going to force the model. We're going to say we really want to study this. We really want to understand this, because already, even just going through this process, we came up with, and we'll be unveiling pretty soon here and share with the board probably next month or the month after, our basically our profile of engaged classroom. So if we do nothing with this, we already have a lot of product that says, you know what, and it's not new stuff that many people are doing, but how do we put it in a way that people realize that you're actually doing this in your classroom? And some people who may not be doing it, here's what you can do to enhance your situation. And so already we're in that mode of looking at that whole notion of helping people to make the experience for our students that much better. And sometimes people think that the only time you need a solution when you have a problem. No, we're not trying to solve a problem. We're trying to enhance the experience of our students and our faculty and our staff and ultimately as a system. So this is not a problem solution approach. This is truly a value add enhancement approach, and which kind of puts us in a different situation in terms of we're not rushing to get to an answer because we have a problem to solve. We're taking the time to study, to analyze, and figure out then what's the best way to move forward for, quite frankly, because the model we're using right now has been around since Shen was centralized 58 years ago. So think about that perspective. And so when you think about that, then what does the next, Jill and I were talking about today. Jill was like, oh my God, I remember you used to talk about 2020 vision, and now the class of 2030 is sitting in our schools. And so what will high school look like for the class of 2030? I hope, quite frankly, it's a lot different than high school right now for the future 2 years in our class of 2020. I hope it's going to be different. And part of our job is to look at those kind of things, and not just different for different sake, different because things evolve, and we have to evolve as a system to better meet the needs of our kids. So I share this as a board because it's a process. It's a long process, and it's deliberately designed to take the time to study the process as we go along and not have it become a popularity contest that people think they can hijack by making a lot of noise about something, because at the end of the day, we don't do things because it's popular. We do things because it's right and better for kids. And that's what this whole process is about. Thoughts, concerns, criticisms? Go ahead. Yeah.
I'm part of the DIDA committee and working with Dr. Wood and her team. I know she's here. And I know that this is the direction everyone. It's very exciting, especially at the last meeting, to hear what some of the teachers are thinking along this. I did have one question about the question on the survey that had to do about syncing up middle school and high school time. Yeah. Is this timing out, or is it the hope that it would time out with potentially pushing back the start time of the high school? So is that completely separate, or you're hoping that we'll get to the same place?
Right now we know that there are a lot of, and I'm going to put that in a technical piece of this whole piece. So we have academics, we have environmental, we kind of put a technical piece. So in this technical arena, we have staff that go between middle school and high school. And so imagine if these are the middle school class periods. Right now, high school class periods are like this. We don't have a single period in the high school and middle school that start at the same time. So it becomes very difficult to truly effectively share staff. And so if you imagine if this is first period of high school and this is first period of middle school that start a little later, even the first period of middle school were to start at the same time as high school, it gives us a much more effective, because this can never happen because of the complication with transporting kids.
I completely agree.
So that's where, so we're looking if there's some sync opportunities somewhere during the course of the day so we can maximize some of those opportunities. And so, I mean, that's a part of it, and that's the beauty of this thing. There's no one thing that's driving the day, because we can't have any one thing hijack the potential of improvement. So just because we can't do this doesn't make sure we can't do anything.
Right. No. So my question is are you pulling back the middle school to start earlier, or pushing back the high school to sync them up?
Who knows?
Okay.
Who knows? No.
But I do think it's a smart move for this district. It's demonstrating that we are flexible, we are adapting to the need, and it's preparing students for the world that they're going to move into. So I think it's an exciting time, and it's very exciting to be here with this happening. And
even it just came up today. Someone asked me the question. So, Mr. Delato advocated for it to look at the start time of high school, early versus later. And so, okay, well, when we're, I call it, when we open up the whole house and look in every room, we're going to look at all the possibilities. So if it can enhance something else, create why not? And so those are the kind of things. But again, we're not going into it, say, okay, we want this model to, if these are the big rocks, if it doesn't do this, it's not going to be effective. Well, if we have 15 intended outcomes and hit 10 of them very well, that's 10 things that we weren't doing as well before. And so the 5, okay, we were living with them before, we have to continue living with them, but we have 10 things that we could actually do better moving forward. And so that's how we kind of go into it, if that's a perspective. And so logistical things is a big part of it. Staffing is a big part of it. Because we can't create a model, for instance, that we can't staff. Or we can't create a model that give kids less course options or less options for graduation. I mean, so there's certain things that from a non-starters that we have to think about as we go into this process. So it's a neat process. It's a complicated process. It's a process that can also, people probably want to try to politicize it, but from us, it's a very practical process. At the end of the day, we want the overall experience to be better. And then whatever we do, professional development is a huge part of it, huge part of what we do in terms of adjustments. How do we adjust to new cycles, new schedules, new flow of classes, new flow of buildings, huge part of it. So again, we know that those are some of the things that's out there. And so if you looked at the survey, there's a whole section on professional development that talks about the importance of those kind of things as well. So again, just a backdrop so you as a board, so once the buzz gets out there, people have their own vantage point of it. We hear, oh, this is awful, this is good, this is great. It's all wonderful feedback that we take in, but at the end of the day, we want to design something that's going to be better than what we have.
I've got 2 points. One is feedback from talking to different parents that have participated in this, retaining flexibility, particularly for these high schoolers. A lot of them, particularly the kids who are focused on music, they often will take 3 music courses, as well as like a DDE, as well as AP classes, and a wide variety of classes that we offer. And from their perspective, when they see something like this, they sort of think that they're going to lose that flexibility to take all that. So that's kind of one of the key things that parents have brought to my attention. Would love to keep some flexibility. Maybe this is a way to increase flexibility if we move forward. The second thing is my experience on this whole time and space. In my previous life, I taught at a military school. It was in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. It's where we taught people how to shoot cannons. And we had classes that were like 4 hours long, an entire afternoon that you had to teach somebody. And we had to understand philosophically how to get in the heads of these young college graduates. And I had some very sage advice from one of my colleagues, and he was completing a master's degree in education at a local university. He said, really when it comes down to it, the way you want to manage that 4 hours is like it's either a 30-minute TV show or a 1-hour TV show. And I've always felt that this 40-minute, 9 times straight is really the old way of thinking of how we taught kids who grew up in the 60s and 70s like me. You had that TV show that you watched, and your class was kind of like a TV show. And our kids aren't like that anymore. I think our students want to have an experience like Jill mentioned, where they're collaborating. I see a lot of with kids where they're competing in a friendly way on an exercise or on a topic after they've been taught it, and they really learn that way. And constricting yourself to a 40-minute where probably 5, 10, maybe 15 minutes is spent by the teacher just to get them settled in and focused on a topic, you really don't have much to work with. But if you had a longer block, maybe alternating days, you really could emphasize that collaboration with these students in a way that they would be excited.
That's a great point.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
Just a quick observation. I mean, we're looking at, a class of 2020, class of 2030, and I think a jump off from what Bob is saying. Shenendehowa with so many kids, we have a big campus, right? And some of these kids may go to Siena, which is kind of comparable really to our campus. And those kinds of classrooms are how colleges run. They have that flexibility, is what Bob is saying. I think you're preparing them more for that kind of environment. And you're giving them more of a ownership, if you will, as you get going. So I think this is all great stuff.
It seems like there are 2 extremes. Doing something the way you've done it because you've always done it that way, and the other extreme is do something different, so just to do something different. And I like the idea that we're not just saying, well, this is the way we've always done it, or that we're necessarily going to make a change just so we can make a change. But we're looking at the potential possibilities. And perhaps as you were talking about various models and so forth, I was thinking, well, how about the idea that some models are more compatible with being combined with another model, as opposed to a single model, whatever. I mean, all the moving parts are moving. They're going to come down somehow, but hopefully it'll have the greatest number of assets and the fewest number of detriments.
And that's why, Barry, if you look at the thing, adaptable, and flexible. We didn't say alternate, meaning throw out one and put another. Whatever we do needs to be something that quite frankly, easier to evolve and adjust with the time, the needs, the demands of what our students are. And as we change the types of courses that we deliver to kids to be much more interactive and engaging for kids, we need to figure out what's that space that lives in. I mean, so now we're talking about time, a big part of it talking about space. And if the board recall, in this budget that we're proposing, yes, relatively small amount, we have a $50,000 allocation in there to start to get some ideas, having teachers in their respective classroom now, in the current model now, say, okay, what are some things I could do in my classroom now to make my classroom much more engaging? And so you asked the question, Mr. Casey, when Mrs. Fleur was here, what do we do with experience that we gain from some of these kind of things? We're doing it now. We're going to start using that as, hey, have some people run through some things and say, how can that then be socialized in other classes? Because now we have proven experts within our system doing some things. And so how do we kind of spur on that innovative thinking to get the juices from becomes a big part of it. So if we change the model, great. But more important, if we change our approaches, our psyche, how we look at teaching and learning and improve that, ultimately, that's what we want. Ultimately, we want to be better next year than we were the year before. And as a system, how do we do that? It's ongoing. It's multiple perspectives. It's moving parts all the time. And it's getting a lot of people invested in being willing to say, hey, I'm willing to try something new. I'm willing to try something different. And that's how we evolve as a system versus becoming very stagnant or remaining stagnant. I'm not saying we are. We're doing a lot of funky stuff now. I use that term all the time. But I'm not sure. I haven't found a better word yet other than funky. But we use a lot of stuff now. It's like you walk in some classroom, you're like, wow, you saw the MOVE program example. You're walking like, wow, that's pretty cool. You know, we toured around today. I saw a class at Shattercon. I'm thinking, wow, I'm actually glad that's pretty cool. You know, so if you keep seeing those pretty cool moments and you realize, after a while, that's what our system is about. Pretty cool experiences for kids, where kids are excited. Jill mentioned, kids are excited to read now because of how we're approaching reading. Not that they read before. It's one thing to read because you feel as if you have to versus read because you want to. Whole different perspective, and that's what we want to try to engender in all that we do.
You know, when you were going through the mismatch between the schools, I just couldn't help myself but go through a mental jigsaw type thing. And I'm saying, well, perfect match doesn't really work because you have travel time. Yep. If you lag one school after another by, for instance, 4 minutes, so that now you have 8 minutes for the person to move, that's fine for the people that are going from the school that are ahead to the one behind. But if you're going the other direction, now you've got almost a full class period before you line.
And that's why it's never simple. Exactly. Yep.
Here, I want to give one more example that was shared during our last committee meeting. Mr. Conover actually shared that, he shared that there's a student that he had in the past and how that student did not do well. I won't say exactly how badly he did in his class, but then he goes on to be an author. And then he wonders why in his class could he not thrive. And so he reflected on his own teaching skills. And then fast forward to more current day. I think I have the timeline right. He had another student that didn't like poetry, and he even said, I'll take the failing grade. I don't want to do that assignment. And instead of accepting that, he flipped it, and he said, so, let's look at this differently. And at the end of it, the student had created, and again, correct me if I'm wrong with this, in citing this example, a video game. He cited his poem through a video game process with imagery from video games. And it was beautiful. It was something very unique. He ended up spending, I think he said, 17 hours working on this project for just poetry. So he went from a student that was not engaged, not wanting to be part of the process at all, to a student that came up with something that is just amazing. A beautiful example, something he wanted to share with that committee. I feel like it should be shared with the board. I feel that, situations like that should be shared with our community, with our Shen community, to say that you don't have to follow the same way we've always been doing it. Think out of the box, get out of your box, and you're likely to engage these kids that don't prescribe to sitting and being lectured to all day. And so he had some beautiful examples. It was really exciting to hear the examples because you can't help but even as a parent to think, well, what could I be doing differently? Because I follow the same mantra, in doing certain things, but you don't get really great results, and you think, what am I doing wrong? Instead of, this kid can't learn. It's just another way of looking at it that, no, they know what inspires them, and just being able to identify that and going with it, and providing an environment to flourish.
I look at it from a personal perspective. When you mention 2030, you're not going to hear the end of this name. Nicholas Whalen, my oldest grandson, is going to graduate. And 2030. He's a kindergartner up at Shengo. I'm really glad that we're looking at this because I think one of my favorite quotes, and it probably doesn't make any sense to people, is somebody asked Wayne Gretzky how he scored so many goals. And he said, I skate to where I think the puck is going to be. In a way, that's what we're talking about here. Trying to skate to where we think the learning will take place, where our students will be. And we know one thing. It probably isn't the 40s and 50s model, or the 60s, or whatever, however your age is, where we grew up. And the openness to change and the willingness to look at it. And I agree with you, Oliver. It's not, if we list 15 outcomes, as we study it, we'll add on more. It's not a percentage we're trying to hit here. Just what's the best we can do with what we've got now, and that we show the willingness to try this and move forward and empower people to think, because the bottom line for us is engagement. And I look at Nicholas, and when he read his first full book, Green Eggs and Ham, this week, and he is so engaged in reading. And I made the mistake of saying to him, I don't like green eggs. He thought I said I like the book. The picture isn't what I. But the same thing doesn't work in math for him, or doesn't, or for the student sitting next to him. So I think we're on the right track here, and I really appreciate the effort.
So again, thank you. More to come, obviously, as we move forward with this work. A lot of folks at both the high school and middle school level engaged in this conversation, and more people will be engaged as we get into the focus group process as well. So you want me to just continue?
Yeah, just keep going.
So the next piece that we have on here, and this is a part of an ongoing conversation. We have had conversations surrounding kindergarten for a while, but I wanted to share some additional information, if you will, with the board in terms of when, and we have a group of people. Several of the administrators are here tonight. So we started thinking about full-day K, and I hear it all the time. I heard it 3 times today. We heard it in negotiations. I hear it everywhere I go. It's like, okay, I hear you. And it's not out of a lack of desire. It's out of many things that we have to consider. And so what I want to kind of share with the board a little bit, in terms of, it's not everything, but what are some things that it takes to make it a reality? And I think some people can actually start having honest conversations. I think people have presumptions and then make those presumptions a fact when they're really not. So we kind of started, what does it take to make a reality? So one of the things that we started with, just some background information. So when you look at half-day K, this is our typical enrollment for the past several years. So you see a very consistent, around 560, 570 in our half-day program, and we average about anywhere between 27 to 30 section half-day K over the course of the year. So they give you some backdrop. And so somebody look at that and say, okay, well, conventional wisdom say, hey, if you're going to go from half to full, just double it. So instead of going from 14 to 15 teachers that cover those sections, just add 14 to 15 more teacher. Life is good, and we go on. Well, not necessarily so. And I think that's the reason why, because this is I hear this all the time. Oh, all you need is just 15 more teachers. And in fact, somebody said, all right, the 10 teachers that you guys are going to put in the budget should have put 10 kindergarten teachers and it would have been full-day K. Yeah, maybe, but no. But I'm not going to argue with you since I'm at the drive-through, and you're inside the restaurant, and I'm hungry. So thank you for your advice. Okay, the ladies at McDonald's beating me up now. I don't know what's going on. So I thought it was ironic that everybody's an expert on some of these type things. And so I think it's important that we have kind of like dispel some of the pieces. So when we think about this piece, so we do recognize that parents some parents don't send their kids to Shen because of the half-day K. So we know that, and we have tons and tons of data. So through our central registration, Mr. Mears' office, we know what kids are in private full-day K program or otherwise. So we know that. So we know that information. So is it 100% all the kids? Maybe not, but it's pretty close to the number of kids that's out there that's not in our system right now. And so we start looking at this, okay, then how many kids actually attended private? And so these are the numbers over the years. You see they fluctuate. And then we kind of come back. So since the numbers fluctuate, let's have this conversation based on an average, just an average piece. So we kind of take into consideration the outliers by looking at the average piece. So just remember, that's a conversation based on averages. So we look at an average of attending 178. This number is going to be important to you in a second. Then we say, okay, of that, we know how many of those kids then kind of come back to us in first grade. So again, looking at this, so this 199, 142 of them come back to us in first grade. Are they 142 of the same 199 kids? Maybe, maybe not, because people move in. So we're not going kid by kid, but on the average, just give us some sense of, okay, when you look at that, and if you look over the years, so about 71 to 75, so conversation purposes, about 73% of the kids that are out there come back to us in first grade. So we kind of look at that and say, okay, we have two different numbers. We have the potential average of about 178 kids out in any given year, about 129 that may return back in first grade. So, okay, so we already know that this assumption here is wrong because this doesn't take into consideration those kids out there. So already this presumption, let's throw it out the table. So whatever you're thinking that, that makes sense, it doesn't make sense. So let's dispel that right away. So we go to this next piece and start thinking about, okay, what about these kids? And so then we start saying, let's do some extrapolation. Let's do some exhibits, so to speak. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to stand because I feel like I'm blocking you guys.
That's all right,
over here.
that's all right. We've seen the slides before.
So we start doing extrapolation. And so remember the 129 that I had from here, this average. So the 129 is the first grade return. So if we just do this first grade return, if we go with our enrollment right now and just use that 129 average number, just to kind of extrapolate out a little bit. So again, we're thinking about, okay, on the average then, if we had full-day K, we could be about 700 kids potentially on the average in full-day K. Recognize we have some highs and lows. We had a high year, that 598 was a high year, and typically it's around 560. So if we look at that and say, okay, if we are planning for about 698 kids is a better gauge than planning for 500 and something kids. And so now we say, what does that translate then into kindergarten sections? And so, okay, why did you come to that number? So if we say we want the average kindergarten class to be 20 kids, just using that so we have a standard comparison point. So if we look at full-day 20 kids and look at that average, now we need about 35 full-time sections, full-time employees in kindergarten. Right now we're about 14 to 15. So now we're a little bit more than double in the sequence. So this is using this average number, right? Average return.
Is this in line with if you just looked at the first grade?
Yeah, sorry, it's going back to this.
I mean, you're adding on.
No, I'm using, so if we just say, what's the average number of kids return? So assuming that, okay, some parents who send their kids to outside K probably would keep their kids would have sent their kids outside K anyway because of, we have parents who kids never ever come to Shen, period, because of religious school reasons or other reasons. And so we know that it's not necessarily because we don't have half-day K, it's just because people just send their kids outside of the system, period. And so we're making that assumption that, okay, if we look at the number, that percentage that may, if we had full-day K, that probably would have kept them here for full-day K instead of taking them out and bringing them back first grade. So that's what that assumption is made. So, but let me go to the second one, because I think the second one probably clarify your question there. So if we make that assumption on that, then we say, you know what, let's make the assumption that on all the parents who send their kids out to private K, on average, back here, about 178 on average, because again, I could use 199 or I could use 161, but I'm using the outliers. So I'm using an average to say, on average, about 178 kids are out there in any given year in four-day pre-K outside of Shen. So if I would drop that 178 in average and say, okay, now let's look at that. Again, using an average class size of 20, we need about 37 sections of full-time employees. So trying to get a baseline. So all of a sudden, we know that it's not 28 or 30. It could be 35. It could be 37. It's something higher than 28 or 30. So that's the point of looking at this. So we won't make the assumptions and lowball, because when we plan, we never plan to meet the minimum standard. We plan to say, okay, what's the high watermark? And if we plan for this and we don't need the capacity, it's great. It's better to have it and don't need it than need it and don't have it when we're planning forward. So that's kind of give us some gauge, and then we start looking at, okay, what does that mean then? So right now, this is our half-day column. So this is where half-day K look at the shell. We have 5 EDK teachers who does EDK sections. Then we have about 13.5. That number, I think, may have been adjusted this year because some of this data was a little bit early in the year. And so we look at that and say, okay, this is our half-day K piece. And so we think about, okay, if we were to go to full-day K, so the asterisk is up there. You see that you know, if we were to go to full-day K, we would still have some kids in full-day K that need AIS supports. So all of a sudden, the question is, do we then put all those EDK teachers and just make them regular full-day K, or will we still need some AIS support? That's a question mark. And so then we have to keep that in consideration. And so we said, okay, you know what? Let's just make an assumption on the full-day K and the potential of using EDK teachers to continue to provide academic supports in the kindergarten arena. Because just because they're in full-day K doesn't mean they don't need academic support anymore. So that may double. But the big part of it, we start looking at this then. If we just look at the 13.5 that we look at right now, this is current year, and just double that, that's about 27. Well, we start looking at the numbers from Exhibit A and B, realize that all of a sudden, we actually need, instead of 13.5, when we go full-time employees, all of a sudden you now need significantly more employees than we have right now. So just on an employee basis, we have to think about it, and also on a classroom basis, because these all become sections and classes. And so then it kind of gives us two things. What's the employee impact? This is teachers, by the way. We're not talking about all the other folks that go into the equation. Just pure instructional piece. Because again, we want to put for us in baseline kind of thing. And then impact classroom. So we started then thinking about that and then started wondering. And so these wonderings aren't mine only. These wonderings are different people. We kind of, wonder and said, okay, if we were to go to full-day K, are we looking to have a K center? Some places have a kindergarten center. Be a noisy place with 700 kids in the same kindergarten kids in the same place. Do we want to go to a kindergarten center? It's a model. It's out there. Those models are out there. Or do we want to keep the current configuration where every elementary schools have some kindergarten kids or some kindergarten classes? Question to ask and answer. Again, just wondering, so to speak. Are we then looking at also then, oh wow, okay, so if we're going to look at that, do we want to try to say every building should have 4 sections of kindergarten? And if we were to do that, that's mean redistricting to create that scenario. Again, those wondering. So all this up here, this is the easy part of the equation. This is us getting a bunch of people and putting a pencil to paper and logistically plan that out. This is the part where it becomes complicated in terms of the model, which ironically we just come off this other model conversation. What is the best model to provide kindergarten? Do we do one thing versus, these are just wanderings, by the way, and I give Karen Skarka this credit because one of them, she's like, I have a wondering. First I'm thinking, like, what is a wondering? But okay, now she explained it. I'm wondering about something. Okay, well, it's a wondering. So my new vocabulary now, favorite word. I have a wondering. So these are some of the wanderings that we have, and how do we make these wanderings reality? Questions to ask, and I'm kind of posing out to you to say as a board, as a community, some of the things to think about. So when we look at this from a kindergarten, if we go to full-day K, how much additional core instruction do we plan for in the equation versus other enrichments in the K setting? Questions to ask and answer. Because, somebody say, well, if you go full-day K, you could do, well, if you go to full-day K, we add now music, we add art, we add all these other things. What does that day actually look like? And I know when my kids in kindergarten, I hated it, absolutely hated it, because my kids spend more time, nap time, than any other time. To feed them and sleep them and send them home. And then they come home all hyperactive and full. I want them tired when they get home. And so that was always a problem when my kids were in kindergarten. They're like, why are they coming home so energetic? Because they fed and slept them all day. not what we want. And so I said it very jokingly because I experienced it as a parent thinking, this is not a good thing for my kid. And so what does that day look like from an instructional perspective? A real wondering that we have to think about. And I'm going to go through these and get some perspective from the board in a second here. What's the impact on related services within buildings? If now we have a full-day K programs within the building, how does it impact the nursing capacity? Because all of a sudden you have more kids there for a longer period of time. How does it impact all those other capacity? So now we have to think, okay, are we adding services in those areas as well? I'm sharing those wonderings with you as we move forward. Do we have to increase the length of the school day when we look at some of these kind of things? Just a wondering to think about if we want to mirror kindergarten to look like first grade, what does that mean now? Because, for instance, kindergartners now don't have lunch. So now if we're adding kindergarten into the lunch sequence, just a simple thing. Yes, sure, Katie can compress it, start feeding kids at 9:30 instead of 10:30. We could possibly do it, but is that what we want to do? Again, I'm very serious wonderings that we have to think about that, again, most people don't think about when they think about these sequence. What was the bus capacity? Right now we have midday run. I think we have started doing some things saying, okay, we can transition bus capacity so people do midday because it's going to impact more runs on the end. So some of that could be a wash, but again, one of those things that we have to study closely as we move forward. The furniture piece, this is always an interesting one because I was in the kindergarten, again, I happened to be Chango, and I sat down in this little chair and realized I couldn't get back up because it was like so low to the ground. And the kids thought it was so funny because I had like roll out of the chair to get out of the chair. And I thought, like, okay, so let's look at furniture, appropriate size, let's look at playground and all these wonderings that we have to think about. I'm sharing this with the board, not to say these things are barriers, but these are some of the wonderings that we have to try to address to become a reality. Supplies, materials, playgrounds, I mentioned that before as one of those things that we're working on playground. So the big questions that we can do modeling from a numbers perspective, and we can have, and certainly those are some of the many wonderings that we have to go through. So the big piece then is kind of like, how do we kind of go back to this piece of reality? So what are the next steps? So let's forget about the wonderings for a second. Give some core fundamental things that if we can't do, those wonderings are just that, wonderings. If we don't have the capacity, the space capacity, it's pointless having answers to those other questions because it will never become a reality. So when we look at those kind of things, do we look at a new school? Big question mark. Do we look at a kindergarten center? Big question mark. Or do we look at adding space to existing school? Big question mark, Deanna.
Even if, on the numbers you're giving me, or saying to us, even a new school, unless you're going to put them all there, it doesn't even work.
So the great question. So it's so funny because, ironic. Today I mentioned Deputy Commissioner Joni Ebert was here, and she was fascinated by our sister school concept. And so she was, oh my God, why you have schools join to? I was like, okay, you haven't been at SED long enough to know any different, so I can tell you this because it's too late. We already got the building aid for it anyway. We do that because, and I use because we were at Shattuckon when she asked that question. Now, Shattuckon is a perfect example. When we constructed Shattuckon, we didn't have 560 new kids. So we attached Shattuckon to Orangen to maximize the existing student count in Orangen and it became an addition to a building, even though it's by beds code a separate school, we were able to include existing capacity in Orangen within a new capacity to justify the building aid numbers to construct Shattuckon. And that's why people don't realize, that's why we have a lot of the sister school concept. And so you're right, so we won't have all of a sudden 500, 600 new kids to justify going building a school. So that's why these things come up here. And again, so if somebody knows that, okay, justification that may not be there, and then what's the cost implication of it? Do we go out and again, all wanderings, and I'm sure Glenn is going to have all these wanderings in the community. News tomorrow, Robinson said, buy a building for whatever millions of dollars and just call it a case center. The possibility exists that do we, and we're now, Kathy is studying because the state has some funds, and we're trying to see the strings that comes with that for 4-day K transition. And so we're trying to see, one, how much funds they have, what are the strings with it, what's the sustainability. So we're studying some financial pieces right now as we speak. So what does that provide to some additional resources to look at not only potential capacity. So, or do we look at, okay, quite frank with you, I've been spending a lot of time in the past couple of weeks because of all the construction stuff and looking at all our buildings. And so we start looking at, suppose we were to add a wing 4 or 5 classroom to certain schools and redistrict across, and certain schools have more kindergarten than, because certain schools don't have the land capacity to do certain things, and certain schools, quite frankly, I'm not sure if we want to add to. So again, the addition to existing school becomes, so I'm sharing these with the board in a sense that I don't think there's any one way to do it. I think there are multiple ways that we have to really look at, because it kind of comes down to the second piece of that, and then what's the budget impact of it, the pure financial budget impact. The biggest piece that we have to figure out, and simultaneously, what's the best way to create capacity? Right now, if the board would say, Robinson, we want 40K, hook or crook, make it happen, and we're not adding any new spaces, we're not doing no new construction, we won't be adding any new staff capacity to it, and we want it to happen. Okay, we'll go and pull, right now, every classroom that's not a quote-unquote homeroom core classroom in the elementary building, because right now we have buildings that we have art and music, we have all sorts of support services in classrooms. Empty all those out and tell all those people everything's going to be in the cart in the hallway. We have 40K, but I guarantee you the environment in those buildings will be so fundamentally different that we're all going to look back and say, what did we actually gain? So I share that with you because people will challenge and say, well, you can do it we can do a lot of things. The question is, what do we gain from doing certain things? And I would never, ever recommend something to the board that doesn't add value to our system. And these are the big questions that right now that we're looking at, trying to figure out, or there's some legitimate recommendations that we can share with the board, bring folks together to kind of sift through some of these things and saying what's the reality of doing these things. And we hear our places have gone for that. The difference between Shen and most school districts, Shen enrollment has minimally been this, if not this. A lot of school districts enrollment been doing this, so they're losing enrollments and creating and have capacity to do certain things, and so the possibilities exist. The question is, back to that first question, what are the next steps? And I have thoughts, but one of the things, and it's more rhetorical to put out on the board. I'm not asking board members tonight to say this is next step, but I think that's the big question that rhetorically we all have to ask, recognizing that a lot of wonderings that we have to address as well in order to make this a reality. So I'll stop there and kind of get your thoughts.
So my feelings are, as far as looking forward, I should say my feeling, you shared the enrollment data in an earlier meeting, and it does show enrollment dropping off and then gradually picking back up again. And so if we all feel that, or believe, which I believe that value could be added in making it a full day. It doesn't have to be they're napping at all times.
Yeah, that's just my
right,
lousy experience. Don't count it on
I nap too, so I've been there, done that. I'm on the same page as far as that's concerned. But instead of it seems like this is an extreme. We're going to have people in carts in crowded classrooms. But to talk about something where we can transition that way, take advantage of the dropping enrollment, and then work towards a longer-term solution. And the other thing with the state aid piece, my question about that is, so right now we cannot get the costs that we have that can be identified associated with running half-day kindergarten is not eligible for state aid. And if we do have full-day kindergarten, then that entire pool could be eligible for state aid. And so that analysis.
So it's partially correct, partially not. So New York State, by law, doesn't mandate full-day K.
Right. Oh, so
as a state, they still don't mandate full-day K. And even though they're providing funding for pre-K, the reason why, because reason why in the state aid formula is as complicated as they could get. In the state aid formula, the pre-K count, the kindergarten count, doesn't count in the calculation of it. And it's one of those kind of things we laugh all the time to say, because most school districts, in fact, 99.9% school districts have full-day K. So if the state were to mandate it, all of a sudden, all those places would exist in K, they would have to now drop those kids into the formula account, which shifts a lot of additional money into the equation. So that's an interesting piece to see what's going to be the next step. So right now, and I don't have the details to share with the board, we're looking at it now. The governor last year put some stuff out there, transition aid for places want to transition to 4-day K. Not a lot of money because there's not a lot of school districts like us, and so therefore, quite frankly, there's not a lot of politics behind it. You know, if you had 96% of the school district that didn't have and wanted, then politics behind it. In reality, that's how the state budget goes. It's about where the political lever. And so we're still looking at that because if whatever hypothetical, if a couple $1 million exists, that we could look at it and say, okay, does this create, from a staffing perspective, a transition? So the first year, we're not hit with 1.5, 1.8 additional $1 million in just staffing costs, and this could help bridge the gap over the years. But then we have to strategically make sure that we don't set ourselves up. We have a lot of seed money up front, and then the next year you're getting hit anyway. So that's the background analysis that we need to do. The bigger piece that I think that we're looking at very closely is you know, again, because I want to be able to legitimately some point come to the board and say, here are some legitimate options, and board go to community if that's the board's desire to say, here's some legitimate options and here are the implications of the options. Are we willing to do that or not? Trust me, I'm not sitting here saying, oh my God, I hate little kids and we don't want to have 4-day K. I said it because sometimes that's what people think. Yeah. It's not the case at all. At all, and that's the reason why we spend so much time calculating strategies, particularly this past year, working with our folks to make sure that our EDK programs are rich and exciting and good for kids, because we want kids to be successful. We want by 3rd grade, kids are all on the similar plane, regardless of whatever their start is, be pre-K or otherwise, and so that's always our goal. So that's not the issue. The issue is then how do we do it in a way that's sustainable, we can plan forward, and have put a plan in place, because all of you, most of you know, certainly Mr. Casey and Mr. Delalo know, Mrs. Gray's kid was in kindergarten when we started planning ShadowCon, and she was graduating from high school almost when we opened ShadowCon. So I say that because whatever we do is going to be a multi-year process. And so that's also a reality that I think it's important to put things out there, because people say a lot of stuff that's not grounded in information. It's not people are trying to be misleading or deceptive. People simply just don't know.
No, that's completely fair.
Yeah, I was going to say, your word wandering, I was thinking of consequences and unintended consequences, and there are a lot of unintended consequences. I think of one that we don't, maybe it shouldn't fit into our equation, but it's real. There are providers out there who have built buildings and expanded and done all kinds of things, who have taken care of it, and that'll be the first group that will be at this table. The other is and I've always felt we should have this. Today we're one of 5 school districts in the state that don't have full-day kindergarten. On the other hand, as you talk about the 2030 thing and where we're going, from an efficiency of dollar and program, if you could add 20 positions, 20 some or whatever, not even counting support positions, to improve the education program at Shenendehowa, would it be having full-day kindergarten? And that's so you say in terms of the next step, I would just say, as somebody who's not going to be here at the table, that's a question to always keep asking. Is this the best bang for the buck we're going to get going forward as it relates to education? Not worried about the dollar piece going forward, but it's a serious thought. How could we enhance education here? It may not be in this, even though my daughter and all her friends and a lot of folks coming along say you should have it. It's a big transition, and as you point out, the problem we have is that people hear this conversation and which building am I going to be in next year?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, they hear redistrict, all they hear is.
Yeah, and redistricting is, I mean, you're mixing a lot here. Redistricting.
Well, I
I'll be
mean,
glad I'm not.
so quit up there, Glenn. So Glenn, drop the little ball, Glenn. I would venture to guess, and the board is hearing this, I would venture to guess in 2 years we're going to be redistricting.
Yeah.
Minimally. We have
Yeah,
to.
you have to.
We have to right now because of the differentiation we have between some of our elementary schools right now. And forget about this conversation. We're going to have to look at that because we have some buildings that are sub 400, and we have some buildings that are beyond 600.
Yeah.
And so just by the nature of that beast, we have to look at rebalancing at some point. And when we did this 8 years ago, we thought it was going to hold for 6 years.
5 to 7 years.
Exactly. And now we're going 8 to 9. So we're well past our useful life, so to speak, with that model, which was a very good model, obviously, because it held this far. So, Mr. Dello, I'm sorry.
Yeah, everything we said here is absolutely true. But before we even get into that discussion, I want to know why. Why are we talking about doing this? I mean, we examining the thing as an exercise to cost it out and to look at all of the problems. Absolutely, I'm all into that. I develop contingency plans and so forth. That's all great. But what's the motivating thing? What are we going to get out of it?
What's our intended outcome,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, you essentially asked the same questions that I asked, and that is, are our kids currently who have all gone through half-day kindergarten at a competitive disadvantage academically and in terms of preparation for college and career, deficient in any way from the kids that are going through schools that have full-day kindergarten? I think the answer to that is pretty much no. Okay. The other thing is, what do we, now, okay, let's say we do all of this and we come up with a way to do it. What can we anticipate actually gaining? You know, what's the return on our investment? And as Mr. Casey said, essentially it's called alternative costs in economics. When you spend your money one way, it isn't available to spend another. What are you giving up that might be a better investment and provide a better return on your investment? Those are questions I think that we really need to examine deeply and make sure we know where we're at before we ever go forward with something as significant as that. And I'm not necessarily against it. I just want to make sure that when we move forward on something and we make that kind of a commitment, that we're going to have something solid to show for it, not because we believe it's going to be the best thing. I mean, belief has nothing to do with it as far as I'm concerned. It's hard facts and data, that whatever we can get on it.
I don't know that you'll ever get to the hard data. I mean, even when we talk about alternative scheduling, there's a bit of a leap. I mean, so we can look at evidence to show that these types of things are beneficial. But I'm not sure how you see these differently. You could argue the same in both camps, as far as it doesn't matter the age of the child. If you're talking about high schoolers versus elementary schoolers, but providing them with an opportunity to learn. When you say that our kids suffer, I don't think my kids suffered, but I'm not thinking about my kid. I'm thinking about other kids that don't have the same opportunities.
Well,
and so we shouldn't discount that side of it.
That's why we have.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I think the beauty of, and I know Mr. Stevens Mr. President had a comment, but I think the beauty of this is, that's why I use the word wonders.
Yeah.
That these are all things that we have to wonder, consider about, and recognizing that it's reason we wouldn't be having this conversation if we didn't think there was any value in the potential of doing it. So let's make sure that somewhere out there, John Q doesn't think that that's not the case. That's why we have this conversation. The conversation is if or when or how we do whatever we do, we need to understand the benefit gains and implications of doing it and go into it with our eyes wide open and that piece of it. And I think that's the important piece of it. And I say that because a lot of it, everybody wants to plan. Hey, are we going to do this in 1 year, 2 years, 3 or 4 years? I don't know. And as we move closer, we'll have more information, and we have more information, and as we have more information, then we can start articulating, if we were to do this, what does it take? And not only what does it take, what are the benefit gain? Because you always have to juxtapose those kind of things. And we never want to have one of those kind of things where, and I think even as our budget process, when we look at our budget process, we look across the whole gamut of program services for our kids. It's never about, I'm going to sacrifice for this kid in order to give to this kid. It's always, okay, minimally do no harm here if we're going to do something here. And even when we look at programs that we're changing, it's because it's not effective or as effective as it should be. So we're making the change to make it more effective. So it's never because of a sacrifice, robbing Peter to pay Paul kind of a scenario. And I think it's important for people to understand. So when we go into these conversations, these are big, huge conversations. And it's important for us to do it because if we're going to do something, we truly do need to back to when Mrs. Florio was here, build with the outcome in mind to say, if we're to do this, what are some expected outcomes that we want to have? And some qualitative and some quantitative outcomes that we want to have and see and make sure that these things happen. I mean, even right now, as we expand EDK, in mind, okay, we do this, what do we expect to see as a result of adding additional EDK supports? So those kind of things. So those, again, a huge conversation, but I think for the board's purposes, to understand that it's not a straight line argument we have, and nor is it straight line planning. Mr. Preston, I'm sorry.
No, I was advocating for Bob to speak.
I'm trying to summarize one of the last slides. It's almost like there are two hurdles / moments of truth. One is, will the community back some type of capital referendum? Maybe we get some money from the state. And then after that, we have to look at our annual operating budget and probably have to say, folks, we may not have the capability to stay within the tax cap. If we're going to do this, I think this is one of these things that we probably want to have next year, one of these, a forum that kind of explains this. And
late next year, by the way.
Okay, late next year. Okay, but I mean, but have in front of people and say, okay, similar to what we had in the safety forum is, you hear a lot of people that are very vocal and emotional about pre-K, and there are some about half-day kindergarten, and there are some that actually really liked it. Okay, because they're able to spend some time with their child as they transition into the school from their home. And so some people really liked half-day kindergarten. And so, to me, what I learned last year is that when you put it in front of the community, whether you agree with it or not, you can get some very strong signals back. And you have to realize that's what the community feels about it. So if we take that approach, there are going to be two distinct hurdles. And the key value that we gain from it is, as we're getting to moving towards the classroom of 2030, we have the capability to have some really well-educated, more than before kindergartners getting into first grade, and then building up of that with first and second grade to the point where you could have a very, we always talk about bubbles of population. How about a bubble of well-taught K1 and 2 grades coming through the system? That to me would be something that you could package and say that's the way to go here. And not go as a half step, but go as a all out. That's what we want to do. Aim high, and that's why we're going to probably ask to move over the tax path.
And an expectation of, let's be real. The expectation of the land sale. Everybody thought, well, a lot of people thought we were taking that money to go and buy land and go build a school there. So, although the expectation may be there, I thank you for bringing this forward and being so and forming clarity. If there's any clarity here at all, because those questions are real. And, the expectation of just taking a pot of money and just doing that because we said that's, that may make the most sense at that point. It may not be the best decision for us. So I think that will need to be vetted as well.
Yeah, and it fits into a bigger picture. The problem, I went to a school that, had, 400 kids, less than 400. They had 300 kids in the high school. It wasn't as complicated. We've got so many layers here, one on top of the other. So as it relates to facilities plans, the fact whether or not this district moves forward with full day K or not is actually, I think, a separate discussion as to whether or not we purchase land and do a building. Because there may be other needs. But we've got Futures Committee, we've got a lot of players on this, and your question was, what's next? My sense would be, and Gary, from what you said, and I think from all of this is, we need to keep studying this I think, Bob, you're absolutely right. Need to hear from the public, but to hear from the public on a pure emotional side isn't going to help us. Because when you look at what's the compelling reasons, what are the alternatives, those are kind of things that you'll have to have some numbers and engage people in that. This could be a big decision for the district, but it's also one that we're glad you're not coming to us tonight and say, okay, yay or nay, thumbs up or thumbs down. This is one that I really appreciate, because last year you and Elizabeth made a presentation on where we were on what would happen. This is another iteration, more detail. Some of the unintended consequences. Oh, we didn't think about first grade. We didn't think about these kids who would be coming in here. We got to add them into the number. What about all the support piece? We've got more. The district got more work to do in looking at. I mean, I've seen it, and you've seen it as well. The state putting some incentive out there for something. I know a really good friend of mine who was the president of a school board for 19 years in this area, and got conned by the state on a consolidation. And they took the money and they ran. And they ran out in 3 years. And this went from an approval every year in a budget to over and over again, defeated, and people not understanding what the down the line impact was. And it wasn't a long-term down. It was like a 3-year deal. And my sense is that's some of what this is. And Bob, it gets at that impact to say to people, okay, here's what we're going to do. Here's going to be the impact. What do you think? We'll hear from parents. We'll hear from expectant parents and people who want to be parents. We'll hear from the other side as well.
This is a good first step because it shows that you're taking it serious.
Oh, yeah.
And to your point, so you look at it at different angles, and to make sure that you're answering their questions. You're not talking at the very high level, which at times it felt that way. It was, and it didn't feel that the questions were being taken seriously. And there were things that just got us away from talking about that, even the land sale. But now, this is a great presentation to get people talking and get us thinking, and so that people believe that it's not that you don't want this. You're looking at it from a very practical perspective.
We're looking at this thing, and oftentimes we consider sustainability. We would have an ongoing $2 million operating increase and so forth. 10 years ago, if we did that, if there was a sufficient number of people to get 50% of the vote or better to pass a budget, we're all set. But we probably would be at a position where we would have to, we'd have the 60% override to do that, because we simply could not increase our budget by that much without, robbing Peter to pay Paul, which we do not want to do, in order to actually put this in place. The reality is that there's always going to be a constituency who will be very, very into kindergarten. I'm not so sure that they really have that strong an educational component. I think it has more to do with socializing the cost of daycare.
Yeah, fair.
I mean, that's the honest truth. And I don't blame them. I would hate to, when I paid out of what I was making, it was substantial, but today the cost of daycare is overburdening. It's horrendous. But is it right to ask everybody else to, in effect, pay for a half a day of daycare so that those people for one more year period don't have to sustain that kind of economic cost? I mean, that's just part of the equation. I'm certainly not saying that that's the biggest thing, but it certainly is a big thing with a certain constituency. Those the group that probably pushes hardest for all their kindergarten.
You're making a good point, and you're right on, because in 2008, when I went to my first dinner at Michael's for PTA, Dr. Robinson, I looked at him and I went right up to him in 2008, and I said, my daughter was in kindergarten, and I said, hey, we're going to look at full day kindergarten. And at that point, I was paying $14,000 a year for pre-K. $14,000 a year. And so I totally hear what you're saying, and that was then. And so we.
She's still speaking to me today, so that's a good sign.
So, yeah.
She's forgotten that.
So just one last comment.
Thank you.
I think in all this, just to, for the board and for the public, we have a lot of dedicated folks that's working with our kids every day in the classroom.
Yeah.
And if you ever want to be reminded what education is about, go to some of our classrooms with some of our youngest kids. And that's when you see like the most amazing things happen. And just like you said, Mr. Casey, your kid, and I say that because I don't want anyone to confuse deliberation with dispute. We're deliberating, we're looking at every possibilities, and that's the only way you can come to a good decision is to understand the pros and the cons and the intended, unintended consequences, all those things in order to make a good decision. But we can't deny the fact that we have some great folks working with our kids every day, and that's what makes our system great. We saw some of those folks tonight with the MOVE program, and we see it. I'm always amazed when I walk into kindergarten classrooms, and there's some of the things about I wrote a book, Everything You Want to Know, you learn in kindergarten. It's so true. And we hope that more adults actually be reminded of that sometimes when they interact with each other as adults. So I want to say, first of all, thanks as a board. More to come. This was kind of putting it out there to the board and to the public to say, these are the things that we sit around and figure out how do we do and come to a point and then have to decide, is this the best thing to do or is this the best way to do it? And not going into it with an absolute yes or absolute no. I'm not looking to find ways to prove that we can't do it. I'm looking to figure out if we do it, what's the value add to our system and how do we sustain it over time? Because at the end of the day, we can't do something today and tomorrow we sacrifice something else in order to sustain it. So that's what we do. We'll see what tomorrow brings, so to speak, the proverbial tomorrow. Not tomorrow, Wednesday, Glenn. But the proverbial tomorrow, and we'll see how things unfold as we move forward as a district. So again, thank you for your feedback on it. I think it's important. This dialogue is important, and we'll have more of it as we move forward. So thank you.
That's why we get the big bucks up here at this table. So speaking of bucks, we've got a BOCES budget vote that so a couple resolutions as it relates to BOCES that we need to move on tonight. I think we have a short presentation on that.
I won't necessarily go through the details of it. The board is, Mr. Delato probably could explain it better in terms of the administrative budget that the board is asked to vote on. Not necessarily details of the budget, but just the sequence of what
the administrative budget is a relatively small part of the total BOCES budget. But the BOCES budget is totally different than how we put our budget together. Because other than the administrative budget, everything else is based on customers, essentially, what the constituent districts do. So if they get a lot of need for services, the budget grows as a consequence. If they get very little, it could be somewhat smaller than they actually start with. So it's not quite the same thing. But we only get to vote on the administrative budget. As far as the actual operating part of the administrative budget, the things that they do for school districts that are specifically administrative to operate that whole thing, that has not actually grown to any great extent, just about flatlined over the last 3-4 years. The growth that occurs in the administrative budget is as a consequence of law. All legacy costs for health insurance from retirees are incorporated into that administrative budget. We added 25 people to the total this year, and that means all of the premiums that BOCES pays for the retirees' health insurance as a consequence of whatever the collective bargaining unit was, now is added on. I keep saying, when are we going to level off? You know, I mean, in other words, while you're adding people who are new retirees, some people are going to die eventually, and eventually it should it should flatten out, but it isn't, and it really will not totally flatten out because the premiums that you're paying are not flat; they keep increasing. So even though you may have some cost savings in one area, you have this other factor driving the costs up. So it's not a good picture because it doesn't seem like that the percentage that the legacy costs represent of that budget is going to go down. And that, in fact, it'll probably continue to go up. But it is what it is. I think, given the fact that the law drives all those costs into the administrative budget, we have to live with that, and we look at the other part of it, and I think they're doing a good job to try to keep that reasonable for the school districts that are paying the freight. And we, along with Schenectady, are paying a lot of that freight.
Who's the district superintendent now?
Anita Murphy.
Why are the other school districts in Saratoga County not part of ours?
There were two different BOCES.
But why is it still up there? Did you split the other ones
Well,
too?
there was once upon a time, there was a genius thought of trying to balance the two BOCES regions, and they were going to take this small little place called Shenendehowa and put it in the capital region BOCES, but this little small place grew and grew and grew and grew to what we have now, and so that we're the biggest in Saratoga, biggest in the region for the most part, and we're in the capital region BOCES. So it was one time was to try to have representative type school districts within the same region. When you think about most of Saratoga beyond, say, Saratoga Springs, become very rural, very fast, and so they'll try to have some light districts and try to balance enrollments. And obviously that's not the case because we have 3 of the largest school systems within the region, within the Albany City, Troy, Schenectady, Shen, 4 of the largest, well, more so Schenectady and Albany and Shen. So it's just an interesting phenomenon that years and years back they made that transition. That
Albany isn't even actually officially a
it's a
member.
non-component district. Yeah. It's a
But
non-component.
listed as-
Well, they get services.
They get services.
Yeah, but they're non-component as a city school.
So they're talking about a 2.3% increase, so we'll be asked to, as we move on to action items, we actually, if anybody have any other comments on this presentation, we'll move on to action items. We have the resolution was in the packet authorizing our clerk to sign that we had approved by a vote the administrative budget. Could I have a motion on that? Naomi, a second. Bob? Any more questions or comments? All those in favor? Motion carries. And then there was a recommendation for 3 existing board members to continue. There are only 3 candidates for the 3 spots. Can we have a motion to accept that? Bob, second. Deanna? All those in favor? A motion carries. We have a contract extension, item C under action items, special education busing. That's a contract that exists, and we have the right to extend that another year. And it was, when it was bid, it was a very favorable bid to us a year ago, and would like to extend that 1 year. Can we have a motion? Deanna? Second. Bob? All those in favor? Motion carries. And then we have a staffing recommendation.
Thank you. We have one recommendation, Jody Gilhaney, retirement after 25 years.
Okay. Could I have a motion on that? Bob, second. Deanna? All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. So before we move to adjournment, it wouldn't be fair to people who are out collecting things and trying to organize the Green and White Gala. The Shen Education Foundation Gala is this Saturday night at 6:30 at the Hilton Garden Inn. There are still tickets available, and the website is open again. I don't know why it was closed, but at any rate, it's open, and we'd encourage anyone.
So, Mr. Casey, if she's available on Saturday night, can you be our guest to the Green and White Gala?
Yes.
Be honored, thank you.
Yes, we can do that.
Consider it done.
We've got tickets, yeah.
So we'll give you the detail. Dr. Wood will give you the details of the gala.
And all you have to do is show up. The ticket thing, whether.
You just show up and just
show
mention
up
that.
and say,
Yeah.
Yep. So, thank you.
And staff and teachers, Bill, I just want to say staff is
Staff, that's right, and staff, or any staff
Yeah,
who
65.
wants to go, the normal price is $100 for staff who aren't comped, it's $65, right?
So, but you're in the house.
You're
So-
on the house, yeah, we've got your
Welcome.
ticket.
Quick question.
Yeah.
You should have this one item, the update on BOE candidates.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, we moved it.
Thank you.
So, as the board and the public will know, we had, the deadline was back on the 16th. for candidate petitions. We have 3 seats, 2 seats carrying a 3-year term, 1 seat carrying a 2-year term as a result of Mr. Casey's submission of his resignation. We have the 2 incumbents, Mr. Presley and Mrs. Rajat, who submitted the necessary paperwork to be on the ballot. So the ballot is printed. As you notice, we only had 2, but yet 3 seats. So we have a seat at this point that we don't have a name on the ballot because the deadline has passed and there's no submission. By law, it's a potential 2-step process to fill that vacancy. That potential 30 could be a 1-year, well, it's going to be the 2-year term. Is a write-in process, write-in candidate process. And so if you ever vote anywhere, there's always a write-in slot in there. So we have a write-in slot that people can write in a candidate or candidates. And so after we go through that process, we're probably going to not announce that night unless based upon what the write-in is. But if we have multiple write-ins, we have to go through some legal maneuvers to make sure that everything is legitimate and account and those kind of things. We hope that it doesn't get that complicated on the 15th. But if it does, we'll at least not announce the 2 and then figure out the 3rd. If we don't get the 3rd write-in candidate, the Board of Education then has the process of appointing someone for that year, and then the person would have to then run for re-election the next election cycle, which would be in 2019. So that's a little wrinkle from the past, and so we'll see what write-in candidate or candidates we have on the 15th. Well, that's a whole different conversation point.
Okay, just I had about there.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Hoffman, for I just lost 3 hours of sleep on that. So we'll see what the 15th brings. So that's kind of where we are with the board candidates right now.
Good. Okay. Thank you for bringing that. Can we have a motion to adjourn? Our next meeting is a business meeting. It's on May 8th. And I believe that night, also, we have a budget hearing that night as well, right? Required by law. I don't know if we, in the past, sometimes we started that early, but we will.
We'll build it in because
we'll build it in. It shouldn't be a long thing. We shouldn't have a lot of comment. And I have a motion for adjournment. Naomi, second. Gary, I know he was ready to do it. All those in favor? Meeting's adjourned. Thank you all very much for your patience.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I know for you.